Hello, my name's Dawn Skelton, and I am the original developer of FaME alongside other people. And I'm going to introduce you to the FaME Toolkit, the updated FaME Toolkit, and what it can do for you as a PSI instructor. So this talk will take about 20 odd minutes, and the plan is that you will feel confident to use the FaME Toolkit to improve outcomes for the people you work with. So I'm starting off just by a brief history of the FaME toolkit. It was developed as part of the physical study, which was delivered by Elizabeth Orton, who's based at the University of Nottingham, and colleagues. The last slide does give all the acknowledgements to everybody's help. And there were three main research questions in that real life implementation of FaME study, which was based around the East Midlands. And the three main questions were: does FaME still work in the real world when it's delivered out there, not as part of a randomized control trial with lots of highly interested people making sure it works? And the good news is the answer was yes. Is FaME maintained, is the fidelity maintained in the real world? And I've put mostly there, which I'll explain in a minute why I mean that. But it was still delivered well enough to reduce falls and to make a difference to physical function and concern about falls, but there were some aspects missed. And we used the work through the physical study to develop the FaME Implementation Toolkit, which was originally a PDF document with downloadable information within that. So, part of what we used in order to understand how it was delivered in the real world and to look at fidelity was that we completed observations of the FaME classes with a checklist. This is just one page of it, and it is available in the toolkit for you to look at. But it was looked at externally by Later Life Training, who had delivered the original training and wanted to ensure that the main parts of training were being delivered in the real world. What we found is that in terms of the fidelity criteria, so that's the main essential elements of FaME that make it work, is that there were a number of reasons why people weren't adhering quite as well as they could do. They perhaps were not supporting people to do home exercise through concern about overloading people, and perhaps they wouldn't keep coming back if you were asking them to do loads of homework. But what we did find in conversations with the participants is that they did value the home exercises, and they also valued the fact that some of the instructors were encouraging them to do that and to do more outside of the FaME sessions. And it certainly increases the speed with which you start seeing results. The other reason for not meeting the full fidelity was a lack of confidence to deliver certain aspects, in particular Tai Chi section in the cool down, and the floor work, the regaining the skill of getting up off the floor. And some of that was because people felt that they needed more training, others because the programs were perhaps too short to allow them to concentrate on floor work, and others just because there was a site policy not to have people on the floor. But whatever happens, those were the three key things that were missed in terms of fidelity. And then in terms of quality, so how well the FaME session was delivered, there were a few things that again brought the scores down a bit. Not asking about health or falls in the previous week at the beginning of a class, not explaining the purpose of the components or the exercises within the FaME program. So why is it important to go onto your toes, for example? Not clarifying the exercises with regular teaching points to improve performance in them and to ensure that people were reducing their support as often as possible, for example, to ensure they felt a bit wobbly in the balance section, or how the exercise should feel during the strength training. Not reinforcing the home exercises, which obviously comes back to fidelity as well, and not really showing correction skills. So if somebody had poor positions, not showing that they had seen that and offering correction to ensure it was done with best technique, which therefore improves effectiveness. Interestingly, only 43% of the people in that follow-up, looking at real life implementation, had progressed the recommended minimum 3 resistance bands over the period of the program. And so we're not necessarily always seeing the best progression of strength training exercise. And what we found is what made a big difference to the quality and the fidelity was a local community of practice of the instructors and the managers, which allowed chances for quality improvement, reflection, and the ability to talk about challenges and potential solutions. So the toolkit, the original toolkit, was a PDF, as I mentioned, with downloadable videos, and that is still available if you wish to download that. But of course, we have now updated it following the Flexi study. But this had 4 main sections: building the case for FaME, so its return on investment, the important outcomes it gives to older adults, how to plan a FaME program in your area. In other words, the various information about costings, decision tools in terms of who you're going to bring on, how many instructors you'll need, and that sort of thing, but also implementing it in the real world. How do we need to stick to fidelity and ensure quality assurance? And then monitoring and evaluation to show it actually works. Because just because it worked in a randomized control trial does not mean it worked with the participants you're using and the class format you have. So it's always important to do a check on that. And interestingly, the return on investment did include putting 10% of the value towards monitoring and evaluation. So the main audience was always commissioners and service providers, but it does contain valuable information for PSIs. And that's what I'm going to talk about in a minute, just after I talk about the evaluation of that first toolkit. Because when they downloaded it, they gave their emails. And it was downloaded over 2,000 times over a 4-year period, and about 1,200 were consented to be contacted. And some had completed a survey, some had interviews. Mostly it was commissioners, but also we had physio managers and FaME program managers involved, so that might have been leisure centres. Most found the sections useful, and 85% said it met their needs. The interviews said it was particularly useful in the early stages of commissioning, which already said to us we needed to put more in how to maintain effectiveness once it is commissioned. But people wanted a more up-to-date return on investment, more varied case studies, more information on how to engage people in home exercise or self-monitoring of progress, and more about the quality assurance of PSI delivery. So Liz Orton managed to get some additional funding to do Flexi. Flexi this time looked at 3 different areas. It looked at East Midlands again, so it went back to East Midlands, but it also went to the Greater Manchester region and to Devon. And so we had more collaborators involved on that. And again, all of those are mentioned in the last slide. But essentially, we made some key updates to the toolkit and we've put it online. So it's now available online, and you can look at individual sections. We've highlighted the new sections so that you know which are new. And as you can see, there's quite a number of new elements added, but I'm going to talk now about how the PSIs will find this useful. First of all, you do need to register. What you need to remember is that we are asking for an email purely because we can let you know, if you tick the right box, that we can update you when we put new things on there, which might be quite useful. We're not going to bombard you with things, don't worry. So you do need to create an account, but it won't take very long at all. It starts off with an executive summary and lots of information about building the case, which if you are already a PSI, you already know it works. And so the key thing you will need is things that are going to support you in doing the right things for your participants. So there are some top tips of program delivery, which are original in the original toolkit, but haven't changed. Exactly the same information came out within Flexi. So the importance of undertaking detailed venue and class risk assessments, asking about participants' health and any falls at the beginning of a session. To constantly review your class numbers based on your risk assessments and the people you have in your sessions. And it may be you need to split on ability and have two different levels of class. And it may be that helps your progression, because if you've got big classes with mixed ability, it's almost impossible to tailor and individualize, which is the key part of FaME. You need to monitor your class attendance and seek feedback from participants that miss classes. Often they're just away for a couple of weeks, they make a decision themselves, they're not going to keep up, and essentially you need to invite them back to come in and join. So keep an eye on class attendance or reasons for people not attending. You may need a cover instructor for holiday, but please do a handover, because it's important that they continue that progression for each individual within the sessions in order for the effectiveness to really make a difference. The social element is important. Peer support and social support outside of the session, and your support as an instructor when you're not just delivering a session, is really important to participants. Time and time again, we've had that back on interviews and focus groups with older adults. It may be that you are not, you're paid on a 0 hour contract, so you're just paid to go in and deliver the session. So perhaps you could use some information from that toolkit to go back to your funders or your line manager and talk about the importance of that peer support and social element following a class. Home is where the dose is. So please focus on active engagement in home exercise within sessions. Reminding people when and where they could do them at home, but also not always just demonstrating being up at the front of the class. Start them off and say, well, you do these at home, so let's see how well you do with these ones, and get people to give you feedback as to how it feels when they do them at home. Always important to constantly reinforce that home exercise for effective dose, and constantly think about reinforcing onward exercise opportunities to continue the journey. What you don't want is them leaving and stopping, because they will decondition and increase risk again. You also don't want them to join the local seated exercise class, because that's a downgrade and is not going to help their balance. So these are very key things that make a difference to the ongoing sustainability of the effects of your delivery of FaME. We have an essentials checklist now. So what should you not miss in your FaME delivery for effective outcomes for your older adults? And it's only a 2-pager, it's not long, but it just reminds you of the key things that make FaME effective. And especially if you are doing multiple other sessions in your daily teaching, you can sometimes perhaps lose some of those key items which are, or elements which are really essential for FaME effectiveness. So please download that and take a look. There is also a self-reflection document for you to consider your exercise prescription and your behaviour change support within your sessions. And this, of course, makes a big difference if you regularly reflect on your teaching skills and your behaviour change support skills. You are far more likely to have a life-changing effect with the participants in front of you. And you may need to use these 2 documents to help reinforce conversations with your line manager or your bosses for smaller classes, if they're trying to pack 30 people in a class, or if you've not got enough equipment because you can't progress beyond the 2 or 3 bands that they've given you to use. So use these perhaps to help support feedback to commissioners and providers. There's some top tips on working with people to understand the importance of home exercise, but also to think about what you offer in that home exercise. It's not good that everybody gets the same exercise prescription for home, because they all have different needs. So you may wish to address asymmetry or pain or preparation for future exercises, such as floor work. You may want to work on particular deficits for that individual so that they've done work in between the groups and they progress more quickly in that skill within the group. And there is, if people would like that, or if you feel you have the capacity to work with this, a home exercise diary that people can complete and bring in and show you each week, and you can have conversations, for example. So there are a variety of other things on the toolkit you could perhaps make use of. The importance of social time, I've mentioned a couple of times, but there is just a two-pager on the theoretical reasoning behind the importance of that social support beyond the group itself. So we've called it more than tea in a chat, and it's really important for you and your service provider or funder to consider the value of that time outside of the class session where participants can offer peer support to each other. You can have other conversations or education about other things such as eyesight, foot health, making sure they've got a good diet with protein, all sorts of things. But essentially, it's really important for social engagement, and we know makes a big difference to adherence. If people have that social time alongside the exercise, they really value it and they will keep coming back. We've got lots of downloadable letters that you might want to use in your service. It's important to think about not just good information to the individuals to know what they're coming to and why, for example, they might not be suitable for FaME and what they might need to do if they're not, but also if they have to drop out through health reasons or they just don't want to, the importance of what they need to do to carry on to reduce their falls risk if they're not coming. And then, of course, if they manage to complete the sessions with you, an end of FaME program letter, just giving them a bit of a heads up on what's improved in your pre-exercise assessment to your follow-up assessment. If they've suddenly come out of risk in terms of their timed up and go scores, or they've improved very much in their 30-second chair rise, for example. These are important things. They won't necessarily notice because their change will be slow and incremental. So these are important things, and we are very grateful to Live Well Southwest Plymouth for sharing their participant letters, which you can download and add logos to, etc. If you're responsible for collecting data, which I hope some of you are, there's some information on case studies and how you might present that data, because commissioners like a good case study, an individual story. So there's some different layouts and examples that you could consider there. There's a falls questionnaire to allow you to actually monitor whether your classes reduce falls, not just improve function. There's an Excel spreadsheet which you can download, which has a minimum data set for you to complete to show that you're making a difference with your classes to each individual. And note that in future there will also be something on what you might want to collect post-FaME, say 6 months later, to see the longer term effects of their involvement in your classes and sessions. There's a lot of information about linking in with therapy services. Sometimes people don't do well or actually get worse, and you may wish to refer them back to physiotherapy. Sometimes they're not suitable for your classes and they need one-to-one. So having links with therapy is important. So there's a letter from the NFIT, National FaME Implementation Team, to therapy leads, which explains your training, the real life evaluation of the benefits of PSI-led FaME, and really the importance of if they have seen a patient during rehab, for that patient to continue on in the community to reinforce and gain additional training benefits over time. And there are some referral forms which we worked with Agile, a special interest group of the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy, to produce, short and long ones, which allow referral or signposting direct from therapy to your service, which allows you to know where to start, where did they finish on their rehab, had the physio done any floor work with them, had they actually engaged in any home exercise, or what band were they on for a particular exercise, for example. But also provide a contact so that you can let the therapy team know what happened to their patient once they came to you. Because the more you give brief feedback to teams which refer into you, the more they're likely to continue referring because they know that their patient benefited from coming to your service. There's a whole plethora of PowerPoint presentations that you can look at, that you can download. For example, how to use the LLT home exercise booklets more efficiently and effectively, importance of social time and what you could cover in that. When is FaME no longer FaME, but rather just a strength and balance program and therefore not as effective. But there's lots of information there that you can download, help yourself and use in your services. So I'm just finishing off with my final thoughts. Although the FaME Implementation Toolkit's main purpose is to support commissioning of full services and FaME services in particular, there are many useful tools within it to support you as PSIs to allow you to deliver FaME the best way you can with the best fidelity for the best outcomes for your participants. And also maybe to support you to make the case to your service leads, perhaps for additional time to support pre-exercise assessment, individualising prescriptions, home exercise, or indeed the social time that's so important, but also even perhaps more equipment or smaller class sizes, because fidelity is important and outcomes make a difference. To give an example, a strength and balance generic program might reduce falls by about 6%. FaME will reduce falls by over 50% in high risk and at least 27% in intermediate risk. So FaME delivered with fidelity makes a difference. FaME is not FaME without PSI delivering it with fidelity. And please let us know anything else you want in there. At the end of the toolkit is a place for you to add information of anything you think's missing and we might be able to help you with. So thank you for listening and enjoy the toolkit.